Call to order the regular meeting of the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors for Monday, March 16th, 2020. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we get to the regular agenda, there are some changes that have been requested to tonight's agenda. We have a request to add to the reports a report from the manager concerning our preparations for COVID virus and handling that. Under new business, we have a request to advertise an ordinance allotting or delegating certain authorities from the board to the manager for the emergency situation. We have a request to consider some funding to Meals on Wheels, and we have a request to remove item 10 under new business, the board member request OW House property, and that will be rescheduled another time most likely. So with those four changes, if no one has any objection, I'll just accept them by unanimous consent and make those changes to the agenda. Okay.
Great, thank you.
So the next item is citizens' input for anything that's not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll go to the approval of minutes from March 2nd, 2020 Board of Supervisors regular meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion second. Any amendments or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next we have State College Borough Water Authority. Board Striker is here to give us a report.
Yeah, so good evening. My name is Ford Stryker. I'm the rep on the State College Borough Water Authority. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Nice to see you guys again. So I want to report on the meeting that was held in February, and also when I get done, I'd like to solicit comments from you if there's anything you want me to take back to future board meetings, assuming they still have them. So there's really two topics that I wanted to address that transpired at the last meeting. So the first is the Water Authority had been experiencing a number of cases where people had, mostly contractors I think, had illegally, if you will, tapped into the water system without paying the tap fees. And this had happened in a number of cases, I guess. So the board adopted a set of penalties that if somebody illegally taps into the water system, they'll be assessed effectively a fine, and they'll have to pay to make any repairs to the water system that was incurred by their illegal tapping into the system. So the fines aren't trivial. It starts at $1,500 and goes up to $5,000. So when you balance that against the tap fees, which could be as much as $2,800, I mean, they wanted to make it a significant penalty so people would be encouraged not to do it. So that was passed by unanimous consent, and it took effect immediately. So you may hear about it, but I just wanted you to be aware that that happened. So before I go on to the next topic, are there any questions on that?
You know who was doing this? Was this large developments, or was just this?
They didn't get into specifically who was doing it, other than the main culprits seemed to be contractors that were probably house builders or developers that were doing this, but they didn't specifically call out anybody, any individual person. Hi, Jeremy. Okay, so the second topic I want to go over briefly was the State College Borough Water Authority's comments on UAJA's proposal to establish a beneficial reuse service area. And I know John was on the schedule tonight, and unfortunately he's not here now. I was hoping he could QA my comments here, but anyway, I'll try to be as careful as possible. So I'm assuming maybe you've heard that UHAA has made a proposal to establish a beneficial reuse service area, not unlike their sewer service area, only this is a bigger area. So, David, can you cue
Yeah, I mean,
the
it's
graphic
making some
here?
weird
It
noises
is making
now. I
that
don't,
noise.
but it should be.
Gee, I wish somebody had brought up the idea of
Ford,
updating the
there's a-
system.
Yeah, what an idea. That's a great idea. You ought to update your AV system here someday. Gee.
There's a clicker or a laser pointer
Yeah.
right there too, if you need,
got
right
it.
there, bottom button.
Okay, so the big idea here, and the map will hopefully become clearer in a few minutes, is that COG, as you know, effectively controls UHA's service area, and its service area that they currently have is a subset, that is the growth boundary effectively within COG. So the proposal here is to have this beneficial reuse area be the entire geography that is made up of the municipalities that are in COG. So it's much wider than the current sewer service area. And unfortunately, the graphic didn't turn out all that well. But so you can see like all of Ferguson Township, I mean all of it, would be in their proposed beneficial reuse area. Whereas it's hard to see, but this sort of light blue area represents the current sewer service area here. So like all this area out here in other municipalities would be part of the beneficial reuse area. So in the write-up, they propose using beneficial reuse water for basically 6 big categories. So one is urban reuse, which would be like golf courses or recreational field irrigation, agricultural reuse, impoundments, such as recreational or landscape impoundments or snowmaking, environmental enhancements, for example, wetlands or stream flow augmentation, commercial and industrial uses such as cooling towers, boiler water makeup, and processed water for high technology water reuses, and then finally groundwater recharge. So those were the 6 items that are in the proposal, and that is being evaluated by COG right now, as I understand it. So State College Borough Water Authority evaluated this, and they got input from a hydrogeologist named Dave Yoxheimer, who some of you may know either by reputation or personally, who's very knowledgeable of the area here. And so they put together a letter, which they sent to Jim May at the Center Region Planning Authority. And they identified 4, I'll call it areas of concern. So the first area of concern is currently there's agreement between UAJ, between Center Region Planning Authority, between State College Borough Water Authority and College Township Water Authority. Those 4 entities have an agreement about how the beneficial reuse water will be used, and if the beneficial reuse water displaces water that would normally be provided by the 2 water authorities, they'd be compensated for it. So one of the big, the first concern they have is that agreement stay in place and that nothing in this new expanded area, if it comes to pass, would alter that agreement in any way. So that was the first concern. The second thing they talked about is the fact that beneficial reuse water is very highly treated, but it still has some what people call compounds of concern. Such things as like caffeine or pharmaceuticals or things like that are in it, maybe in very small quantities, but those, could be come into the water supplies depending on how this reuse water is used. So they're concerned about that. The third thing they were concerned about is that DEP regulations currently preclude using beneficial reuse water in residential uses. And this map obviously has a lot of residential area on it. So they're concerned about, how that would really play out, if this beneficial reuse area is the same as the cog growth boundary. And then finally, a very big concern for them is this whole idea of groundwater recharge. And they're concerned about, because of the karst geology in this area, that the water may quickly get into the groundwater, depending, especially if it's directly injected. So, there's some concerns about pollution, especially an adverse impact on the water supplies. So those were the 4 things they had in their write-up. And the reason I'm taking so much time with this, and I apologize for maybe running over my time limit here, but I think this is a really important thing for you to be aware of, and it will come before COG at some point, and you guys will have an opportunity to weigh in. So I wanted you to be aware of it. And I'm sure UAJ could probably, they're not here, but maybe when the time's right, they could come in and talk about it from their perspective. So any questions or comments? Okay, great.
I would just add a comment back on, as far as the recharge concerns.
Yeah.
Is knowing what the reverse osmosis process is. I tend to think that the water coming from UAJ is cleaner than the water coming from State College Borough Water Authority. I think that it's more highly purified. That's why it's listed as one of the uses is technical, for technical business or manufacturing, because that water is purified to a level well above what you get from a water treatment. And I've wondered why they have that concern. I mean, they've expressed that concern since the beginning of this process.
Yeah. And
unless it's a concern that they fear a failure of the system and that something would be bypassing the reverse osmosis, I have trouble understanding their objection. That's just a comment.
Yeah, I think maybe there's 2 issues. One is the one you just mentioned about the possibility for some mechanical system failure for pollution. I mean, the other thing, honestly, I'm sure is a concern is a public perception. If you're injecting even treated wastewater, very close to the source water for the wells, there may be some concerns there. If you read through the letter, which I believe, well, you will see soon. I don't know if it's completely public yet, but I know it will be public soon. They discuss some questions they have about how the recharge would work. Would it be infiltrated? What protocols would be put in place to prevent, a problem? So I think that's some of the concerns, but I mean, that is their concern. So I wanted to share that with the group.
Yeah, I just wanted to send that back.
Okay, I appreciate that. Laura?
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. I think, so I don't know, but I wonder if it's because the starting point is sewer as opposed to the starting point be surface or groundwater, and even though those can be contaminated, we don't know for a fact that there's pharmaceuticals and stuff like that in there. So I'm wondering if it's what you're starting with already has a definite amount, so you could add this as like kind of a follow-up question.
Yeah, I would even raise the question whether those things are there in levels higher than what comes in there.
Right, yeah, and that's a good question, and for Dave Yoxheimer, and he can probably talk to you about septic and that and everything, and we're probably information seekers up here, so be interested in that. But I think that's probably also, I'm guessing, part of their question about how it's going to be injected, because if they're thinking of the earth as kind of a biofilter on that kind of thing, and pre-filtering it before it gets into the water system, I think that maybe then would make sense. So.
Right. I think that's exactly what their question is in the study. See, this is to do a study. So, but what they really are interested in knowing is if it was used for recharge, how would it be recharged? Would it be recharged through the soil, or would it be direct injected, or
right? That makes sense.
So that's just a concern they have, going into the study.
Thanks. That's a good question.
Okay, so I guess my last comment is, besides those 2 topics, are there any things you guys would like me to take back to the Water Authority? Any concerns or questions from the township? I know I'm hitting you cold, but and that's okay if you don't have any. But if you do have any, if somebody could relay them either through Dave or just, do you guys have my email? Send me a note.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Great report. Thank you.
Next, we have UAJA. John is not here tonight.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And the other
He confirmed a
appointee
week or
has
so
not
ago.
been to a meeting yet, so. Thursday, if they don't cancel.
Okay.
Or Wednesday, no, it's Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Yeah. Next is Ferguson Township Tree Commission, Scott Flynn.
Scott Flume also
Yeah, he's
just
not-
asked to be rescheduled.
So we'll
today,
reschedule
So I'll
that?
put him on for
Okay.
April 20th.
Okay.
Great.
Sorry.
And then we have a report from our manager on COVID preparations.
Yes, thank you. So I'll try to be as comprehensive as I can and specifically, maybe reference some of the things that are applicable to Ferguson Township, not saying other municipalities aren't following suit or doing their own thing, but we're trying to be consistent across Center Region with how we put information out there relative to COVID-19 or the coronavirus and the effect that that's had on local government operations. So there's a couple of things. Number one, beginning last week, I notified staff, municipal staff, that if you can work, if you have the ability to work remotely, that you ought to be working remotely. So I sent a number of our office staff home that have the capability to access our infrastructure from a remote location and have the infrastructure in place at their private residence, the bandwidth that they may need for internet access in order to be able to function as a staff member from a remote office. So there's approximately 7 individuals that are working from home. Right now, all municipal services are being provided at full, with full capabilities. We haven't pared back on services, so there's nothing that residents aren't going to have access to. Police, public works, if there's any land development issues or anything that can be submitted, but understand that it may take longer time for response. If you're having, if you have a need of a face-to-face interview, that could be moved to a remote interview, using technology that the township has in place for a Zoom meeting or a teleconference or by a phone call. So this information was put out on the municipal website. It was also distributed through other municipalities that are doing, that are following similar protocol. We are notifying, individuals today that beginning tomorrow morning, the offices will be closed to public access. So our doors are going to be locked. They'll only be accessible by fob, meaning by a remote entry that staff members are able to use. We're still going to be open during normal business hours. Residents can still reach us by phone or by email or by using the Contact Us form on the township's website, which is twp.ferguson.pa.us. And there's a Contact Us link right on the home page where you can use to access various departments. So we will still be responsive and we'll still be able to be accessed through a variety of media. We just won't be able to be accessible via foot traffic or walk-in traffic. The biggest impact that that's going to have is on residents who are coming to the township building to pay their tax bills, because that's the season that's upon us. Residents who are paying their tax bills should put their payments in the drop box, which is just to the left of the main entrance, and they can put it in an envelope with the appropriate identifying information that's available right there. Our tax associate, Paul Hockenberry, will retrieve it and make sure that the payment gets properly processed and assigned to the correct tax parcel. So we'll still be able to do that. In fact, you can access the drop box even outside normal business hours. We'll make sure that drop box gets sanitized regularly throughout the day, that there's instructions that are placed on the front door that folks know how to access it. And of course, you're also welcome to mail in your payments, which is always an option that's available. So the biggest inconvenience right now for the township residents is going to be just that. It's going to be starting tomorrow. Until further notice, the doors will be locked to public access. Right now, we're trying to, all the Center Region municipalities, so Ferguson, Patton College, Harris, Half Moon, State College Borough, are trying to provide all of the information out to residents, including directing our own website traffic to State College Borough, who is the clearinghouse for information relative to municipal business on this. There's also articles of interest that are posted from credible sources, like the Centers for Disease Control and the Pennsylvania Department of Health. So those can all be accessed directly from the State College Borough website or through our webpage. There's a news item right at the top of the page where residents can click on and they'll be redirected to the State College Borough webpage. We also have some material that we promoted or put out on our own website, like there was a Center Region disaster declaration that was just formally ratified this afternoon by the COG General Forum. What that does is that gives the region the ability to request reimbursement from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, for some of the funds that were authorized as part of their statewide and national disaster declarations. So we are tracking all expenses that are incurred and associated with this specific pandemic, and we'll do what we can to request reimbursement for that. So that's really why there was a region-wide disaster declaration that was ratified today by COG. We have a regional emergency management coordinator, as you all know, that's Sean Kaufman. So much of our requests and regional endeavors and initiatives that are cooperative are going through Sean Kaufman, as our regional emergency management coordinator and our primary point of contact. And I think that's about the most of what I wanted to bring to the board and the public's attention at this point. This is a very fluid, as you all know, and evolving issue, so there are updates daily. In fact, it wasn't until just this afternoon with Governor Tom Wolf's declaration of a statewide shutdown, I guess, or statewide closure of all non-essential businesses and functions that the township decided that we were going to take that next step and be closed to foot traffic for the general public. So changes daily, changes weekly. I'll commit to making everybody aware of things either through the State College Borough portal as our clearinghouse, or anything that is specifically applicable to Ferguson Township or is different in any way, we will push out through our local media. And residents are also encouraged to access CNET if they don't have internet access, or contact the office if they have specific questions by phone. Our phone number is 814-238-4651. And our hours of operation are Monday through Friday. Monday through Thursday, we're open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Friday, we're open 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we can be reached that way. And I'm happy to speak to anybody by phone, by email, by any means necessary in order to answer any questions that folks might have that I'm the appropriate person to respond to. So are there any questions that you all have, or things that you want me to elaborate or expand on?
I just wanted to ask, I'm sorry if you said this in your update. So there are some upcoming commission meetings canceled. Tree Commission, is that a Parks Commission? Thank
you, that's a good point. No, I apologize, I did miss that. So we did close all new requests for main meeting room or township facilities use. So outside groups that are requesting to use any of our facilities until further notice are not permitted to do so. That's pretty consistent throughout the region, the regional municipalities. We are basically, we have cleared the calendar as well for authorities, boards, and commission meetings for the month of, at least for the month of April. So zoning hearing board, which was scheduled for next Tuesday, has been canceled through April. The Parks and Recreation Committee, which was set to meet this Thursday, has been canceled. The Tree Commission, which was supposed to meet this evening, has also been canceled. And the Planning Commission, which meets next Monday, has been canceled. So all of the authority, board, and commissions meetings that are taking place in the foreseeable future, at least, and when I say foreseeable, I mean until there's been some development in a positive way with this pandemic, are either canceled, or we do have the ability now to do some remote teleconferencing. So with the statewide issuance of a disaster declaration, the Office of Open Records for the Commonwealth has provided some guidance on the hosting of telemeetings via, with respect to the Sunshine Act and some of the restrictions there. And municipal governments in Pennsylvania, as the Office of Open Records has provided guidance on, are permitted to host telemeetings or teleconference meetings as long as there's a two-way communication platform, meaning as long as the public has a way to engage the government officials, whether it be you as elected officials or authority board and commission members, and that there is a proper advertisement that the meeting will be done via a teleconference, meaning we'll have to put a notice in the Center Daily Times in the newspaper. We'll put it up on our website too. So should the board or any authority board or commission elect to go that route and host an agency meeting via a teleconference, that would be advertised with instructions on how to access that remote meeting, and we'll also put some directions for people on the township's webpage. But again, it needs to be announced by the chairperson of that committee at the onset of that meeting that it is a teleconference meeting or telemeeting, and there needs to be some general instructions provided on how to access it at that meeting too. So there's some procedural things that we need to be mindful of, but because of, by virtue of this disaster declaration, although the authority boards and commission meetings for the upcoming few weeks have been canceled, we do have that capability should it go into April or longer and we need to, get some essential business done, including meetings of this body.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
And I would say it's likely that we'll try to do that for the April 6th meeting. We haven't really established that for certain yet, but I think that would give us a good, because this could extend quite a while based on information that came out today from the federal government.
Right.
So it would be good to at least try to get one meeting,
Yeah.
make sure it works.
Yep.
So.
I'll be
Okay.
learning our way through that.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay, well, thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much.
And then from that, we'll move to the unfinished business. A public hearing on an ordinance of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 1 of the Code of Ordinances, Administration and Government, Part 4, Boards and Commissions, by adding the following. Part F2, Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee, Section 450, Creation and Membership, Section 451, Organization, Records, and Meetings, and Section 452, Responsibilities, and renumbering existing sections.
Thank you. So provided with the agenda is a copy of the ordinance that's been advertised for this evening for public hearing. As the chairman correctly pointed out, it establishes the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee. The responsibilities in general are noted under Section 452 of the proposed ordinance, and they include prioritizing objectives and action steps described in the Small Area Plan, identifying and assisting in the preparation of grant applications and requests for funding to advance the projects described in the plan, facilitating community engagement events, formulating and submitting requests for funding to the township manager for consideration in the capital improvement program budget and annual operating budget, and then sort of a general miscellaneous clause, other duties relative to the implementation of the Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan. As I said, it's been included with your agenda this evening. It's been advertised for public hearing. Staff is recommending the adoption.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. If anyone cares to address the board on it. Seeing none, we'll take a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 1, Administration and Government, Part 4, Boards and Commissions, by adding Part F2, Pine Grove Mills Small Area Plan Advisory Committee.
Second.
Having a motion and a second. Any comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote.
This is presented as ordinance number 1053. Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Mitra?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, repealing Resolution 2013-26, and adopting a new special events policy.
Thank you. Provided with your agenda this evening is a copy of that resolution that was advertised for public hearing this evening. The board had a chance to review the draft amendment to the special events policy on March 2nd. It's also been included with your agenda. Mostly, it revises protocol to be more consistent with other related documents that are provided by other applicable agencies like the Department of Health at State College Borough, which does the inspections for food consumption at these events. There's also been some allowance for certain events to serve alcohol subject to approval of the police department and the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. If anyone cares to address the board? Seeing none, and take a motion.
I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution repealing Resolution 2013-26 and adopting a new special events policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Thank you.
And thanks to the chief for reviewing and
Yep.
I'll pass it on.
this will also be a roll call vote.
This is presented as resolution number 2020-11. Ms. Dennini?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes,
Mr. Mitra?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
motion carries. Then we have the consent agenda, which consists of a pay application and a special events permit. Anyone care to pull either of those off the consent agenda? I'll take motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is a public hearing on a resolution of the Township of Ferguson, Center County, Pennsylvania, approving a cost-sharing agreement with State College Area School District and other partners for consulting services for a solar power purchasing agreement.
Thank you. The resolution's been included with your agenda this evening, as well as the appendix to that resolution, which describes the cost-sharing agreement with State College Area School District. There's also other municipal partners and parties that are proposed to be part of this agreement that are included as signatories to that cost share. Basically, a steering committee was convened several months ago. Representing Ferguson Township is Eric Anderson, the finance director, and the charge of that committee is to evaluate and solicit proposals for a regional solar power purchasing agreement. So this would be, a company that would either use existing solar photovoltaic arrays or solar farms that they have, or construct a new facility, and the center region or the parties to this agreement would then purchase electricity through this agreement. So at this stage, it's not authorizing any movement, any construction of the facility or engagement of that firm that would be the service provider. It would simply be to engage a consultant to help the committee with the process. So part of that is a cost obligation that would be passed on to the township. State College Area School District has agreed to be the lead entity facilitating this, so they'll handle all the management of the contract, as well as invoicing the municipal and countywide and other partners that are a part of this agreement. The Ferguson Township share in this is just over $1,100, $1,131 towards the overall projected cost of about $65,000 for the legal and consulting services in accordance with this. The township solicitor and the other regional solicitors have reviewed and provided their comments on the agreement, most of which have been included in the final document. There's been a subcommittee of the Solar Power Purchasing Agreement Steering Committee that's been convened and tasked with issuing the request for proposals, and they've developed a rubric against which to evaluate responses and make a recommendation for selection.
This is a public hearing. If anyone cares to address the board? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the resolution approving a cost-sharing agreement with the State College Area School District and other partners for consulting services for a solar power purchasing agreement.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have a question. So, is it provided with the agenda? I could not find it. Is it numbered 1? I see 1, 2, 3A, 3B. and then 4A is something else.
It should be
It's five.
.5, resolution
.5. Got
SPPA
it.
cost sharing
Yeah,
agreement.
got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
The bulk of the agreement is Exhibit A, and then the resolution's the one pager on top.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Laura?
I've brought this concern up before, and it may be jumping the gun, I'm not really sure. But I think because the RFP involves criteria by which they select the consultant, perhaps it's relevant to mention at this point, that sometimes when large-scale solar arrays are built, forested land is cleared to do so. I'd just like to reiterate that perhaps this board would encourage the region to look for land that's already been cleared if our path that we end up pursuing down the line is to actually build an array.
Yeah, we could ask Eric to pass that comment along. I'd be
Great.
fine with that.
Thank you.
Looks like everybody's okay?
Or on the roofs.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? In that case, this is a roll call vote. It's a resolution.
This is presented as Resolution 2020-12. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Mitra?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Strickland?
Yes.
Ms. Denneny?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next is an authorization of grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for a recycling grant program.
Thank you. So provided with your agenda, there's nothing provided with your agenda. This is not a resolution. I apologize. Let me start over. So under Act 101, there is a new municipal recycling grant round that's been opened. The deadline, at least tentatively, to apply is March 20th. These are relatively short, simple grants to submit. The township's been very successful in securing these in the past, and typically we've used them either to acquire or to refurbish our one-man or one-person leaf collector equipment. So these are the pieces of equipment that have the large hoses on the side that we use to collect leaves. So they have an estimated cost of approximately $303,000. These are 90-10 matches, so 90% of it would come from the Commonwealth if we were successful in securing the grant, meaning our local share would be $30,311 as an estimate anyway. Another advantage to securing this grant if we were successful is there's a new piece of equipment that Public Works has identified, which is a single axle cab and chassis with a hydraulic hook system. This is, think like a big hook that comes out of the back, and you can use it to change the boxes or the trailers that are affixed to the truck. So when we need it for months of really heavy leaf collection, of course, the fall, and even in the spring when the leaves from the previous winter are being collected that weren't collected in the last round, we could use this for leaf collection. And other times of the year when the leaf collectors are sitting or they're not being used as heavily and we don't need all of them, we can use them for other purposes. In the winter months, for example, we can attach a brine tank to them and we can use them to pre-treat roadways. We can also use, we can place just a single axle dump bed on them and use to assist with brush collection or other needs of the Public Works Department. So this would be a pretty versatile piece of equipment if we're successful in acquiring it or in securing the grant. But right now, all that's being requested of the board is that you authorize the Public Works Department to submit the grant application.
Thank you.
I move. Okay. I move the Board of Supervisors authorize the submission of an Act 101, Section 902 municipal recycling grant application for a one-man leaf collector and brush box dump truck in the amount of $111,000.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any discussion?
So what are the terms and conditions? I'm not saying that we'll do this or some municipality will, but in these types of things, could a municipality buy it and then sell it the next year and make money?
No. So there are very restrictive guidelines that the Department of Environmental Protection places on equipment that is purchased through this grant program. And we're very familiar with them. We've done this in the past. We've sold these pieces of equipment typically to, well, always, in all cases, they've been to other municipalities. And so the grant obligations are transferred from us as the initial recipients of the grant to whomever is purchasing the piece of equipment from us, meaning we couldn't, as an example, to use this piece of equipment as an example, we couldn't sell it to another municipality to be used solely as a brine tank, or as a brine truck, because it needs to be used for its intended purpose, which would be as a one-person leaf collector, so they would have to agree to do that. So along with purchasing the piece of equipment, they would also agree to the terms and conditions of the grant, which there's quite a few of them. And then also, there are, as long as you're transferring intermunicipally, you're generally in good shape, but there are other things that would apply if it was being sold to like a private purveyor or a private company. We haven't done that, and I don't anticipate that we would, but in fact, what we generally do is refurbish these because the chassis on these, and this one may be different since we're going to use it in the winter, but the chassis tend to outlast the useful life of the equipment. So in the past, we've been successful in getting a second grant to refurbish and do the upfitting, which we can do in-house at a very cost-effective way, and just purchase the equipment. So it's been a good investment, and it significantly reduces our time that it takes to collect leaves, and it also significantly reduces our exposure for workers' compensation claims. And they look cool. They're a little noisy, but they look cool.
So noisy.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is a proclamation designating the month of May to be 2020 Bike Month in Ferguson Township, the week of May 11th to be Bike to Work Week in Ferguson Township, and May 15th to be Bike to Work Day in Ferguson Township.
I don't have anything to add to that.
We have done this in the past years, and
I move that the Board of Supervisors proclaim the month of May to be 2020 Bike Month in Ferguson Township, the week of May 11th to be Bike to Work Week in Ferguson Township, and May 15th to be Bike to Work Day in Ferguson Township.
Second.
a motion and a second. The Bike Coalition will be happy to have this approved. Any comments or questions?
Well, are we going to be working?
There's always that question
On-
of who's not working from home.
Right, well, do a big circle and go right back to your house then.
Okay, no, I'm fine.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the Cottages at State College Final Planned Residential Development Plan Amendment.
Thank you. So I'll introduce it briefly, and then John Sepp is here with Pantera Engineering representing the applicant, and he, I think, is going to do some, kind of briefly review. There is a memo that's included with the agenda that describes the requested changes. Because this is a planned residential development final approved plan, a final PRD approved plan, any amendments that are post-final, meaning after the approval has been secured by the applicant, have to go in front of the Board of Supervisors. There's a few minor exceptions to that, but these don't qualify for those. So what's being proposed, there's approximately 12 changes that are being requested. They include changes to grading, they include revisions to the clubhouse area, the addition of some missing parking stalls, and then some landscape modifications to improve the landscaping of that area. So with that, unless there's any upfront questions, I can turn it over to John. I should note that it has been reviewed by staff as well as the township's stormwater engineer. There's a few comments that are included from NTM Engineering, who does the stormwater reviews for Ferguson Township. So what's being recommended is that the requested amendments be approved subject to the conditions or the resolution of the comments, maybe more appropriately, that were provided by the township's stormwater engineer in his letter, which is also included with your agenda. So,
Thank you. John?
And John, I got your, you wanted to show, bring the plan set up, I think, right?
Okay, great.
I can do that, in theory.
Yes, good evening, I'm John Sepp from Pentair Engineering. I'm here to present to you the proposed minor changes to the yard's PRD and also answer any questions you may have. A lot of these changes are very minor that are actually even so minor they're hard to point out, like changes in door locations in the clubhouse, changes in yard drain locations in the areas around the clubhouse, moving a building back 2 or 3 feet, moving a wall of a building a foot, changing the gas line location that serves the pump station, changing the geometry of the driveway going into the pump station. If any of these would be worth discussing or questioning about, I would classify them as the 8 parking stalls that were left off the plan. There's over 1,038 parking stalls for the project. Somehow during the revisions to the project, 8 of the stalls were not accounted for, so we've added those 8 stalls to the northwest part of the project. It results in less than 1% of the amount of parking required. There we go. That would be right in this location is where we added those 8 stalls. From a stormwater perspective, the project's designed for well over that amount of stormwater. It's about 500 square foot of additional impervious. Typically, we look at under 5,000 square feet as considered being a minor change to a stormwater plan, and the staffs agree that that's a very minimal change to the stormwater plan. The eastern part of the project, the grades are being raised to help use the material that has been generated from the western part of the project, that we could take that dirt, move it over to the eastern part, raise the site up, that way it doesn't have to be hauled off-site. Again, no changes to stormwater management or any significant changes to the grades of the project going through. And then the final change that we could get into more discussion about would be the change to the landscaping plan. The biggest part of that change would be the size of the trees that are going to be installed along Whitehall and Blue Course Drive. The township requires, leave 2-inch caliper trees for street trees, and the developers opted to install 3-inch caliper trees. They've actually opted to put in larger trees, and it's required by ordinance. In addition, the initial plan had a uniform variety of trees on both Whitehall and Blue Course. The landscaper has requested to use a variety of trees, which is in conformance with what the townships and the tree commission are looking for, in that in case there's a blight or some other malady that would affect the trees, to have a variety of trees would be beneficial, that it wouldn't affect all the trees on the street. Scott Burke from Scott's Landscaping has worked with Lance King on these changes, in addition to changes in the variety of some of the shrubs that have gone into the project as well. I did present the landscaping changes to the tree commission at their meeting last month, and I know that Lance is in favor of the changes that we've made. So that gives you a brief overview of what we're presenting here tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for John? Laura?
Thank you. I have like about 6 questions. The ADA access to the pump house, is that because that's operated by a public entity? Why do we need ADA access to the pump house?
I don't know why we need it, but we have ADA. The access and the location of the walkways changed, so that's why that walkway changed, and that's why that access changed.
Will the public be accessing that area of that facility?
They should not be accessing that area.
Okay, that's confusing to me. Do we have an answer on why the pump house access needs to be ADA?
I mean, I'm not familiar with the specific reference presumably to the property maintenance code, but there is a heavy component of ADA accessibility, so I at least wouldn't be surprised if it were a requirement from
Okay.
It's more of a code issue than
enforcement.
a land,
Okay.
definitely more than a land development issue.
Than an
Yeah,
actual
I would think
access.
that's true.
Okay.
But again, that's not really my area of expertise. I can't
Okay.
say for certain.
Thank
But
you.
having just lived it with this facility, I know.
Thank you. And then 4C, revised grading on the eastern part of the site. C, added retaining wall and guardrail above bioswale to accommodate grading changes. Isn't the purpose of the bioswale to intercept water and filter it? So
Yes.
if you're making a retaining wall, say, above that, doesn't that interfere with the actual function of the bioswale? Or am I not understanding the orientation correctly?
No, it's this location right here, and the
So
reason.
it's below it.
It's on the side of it and above it. So, in other words, the retaining wall is protecting the bioswale. Instead of filling down into the bioswale, we put a wall up next to it that would hold the soil and preserve the integrity and the geometry of the bioswale. And the storm sewers that empty into the bioswale will continue to empty into the bioswale at the locations that they originally were planned to.
Okay, so could you just point up there, I know it's kind of small and hard to see, but where the bioswale is
Sure.
and where the retaining wall is?
I don't know if we could zoom down on.
Could you
here.
slide it up a little?
Probably.
Thanks.
There we
Where?
go. It's over on this side
yeah,
here. It's probably on the next panel. There we go. This dark line is the retaining wall, and the bioswale is right here.
So the wall is against the road and the bioswale is on the other side of the wall?
Right below the wall.
Okay, so how does the water get from the road to the bioswale? Is it going into a storm sewer?
Yes.
Okay. The gas line, I've lost what number that is. Oh, it's down on the next page. Number 11, revised sanitary sewer pump station generator gas service line location. Could you point to where that was and where it is? And in particular, I'm interested in knowing if that gas line is moving, where is it moving from to, closer
Okay,
to
sure.
residences or?
You could keep flicking down here, Dave. There we go. The gas line previously had been on.
Right away?
This is the pump station right here.
Right,
This is the future park.
yeah.
Here's the stormwater basin.
Mhm.
This is the property owned by Penn State. The gas line previously had
Oh,
ran outside the easement where the sewer lines and the access is being located. It's been moved into the easement.
into the park?
No, into the easement. Well, it's on the park property, but it's in the easement that was granted for the pump station.
So
And the access
the
to
gas
pump
line
station.
used to be on Penn State property, and now it's moving into the park property?
No, it was always on the park property, but initially it was outside the easement
Okay.
on the park property
Understand.
that had been
Gotcha.
granted for the pump station.
Thank you.
Sure.
The item number 3, the sign, added lighting for the sign.
Yes.
Could you describe that a little bit to me, what that's going to look like and where it's going to be placed?
Yeah, that'll be at the entrance to the project. And it just illuminates the sign. It's just a light that's going to shine onto the sign. It won't shine beyond the sign, and it'll be shielded from the back.
Okay.
So it'll just illuminate the sign.
Okay,
And I know that was one of the comments from the reviewing engineer to provide a profile of that, which we will.
okay.
Anything else? Or anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes. Take a motion?
Sorry. can't do
No,
that.
no.
I can do
I'm just
that.
waiting for somebody to find it on the
Yeah,
computer.
did you go to the bathroom? Like, you have to go to the bathroom.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors approve the amendment to the Cottages at State College Final Planned Residential Development Plan, subject to the resolution of comments made by the township's stormwater engineer in the letter dated March 12th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next is an award of professional services contract to conduct the Pine Grove Mills mobility study.
Thank you. So the board may recall that kind of in conjunction with the approval of the small area plan, there was some discussion about performing a mobility study in the village of Pine Grove Mills that would be akin to what was done last year in the North Atherton corridor and some of the surrounding areas. So the study, some of the goals of the study would be to facilitate communication and coordination with residents and other commuters that use that corridor, assessment of the current conditions that were identified in the small area plan, of course an element of data collection and transportation safety assessment, specific focus on pedestrian and bicycle safety audits, and general mobility assessments that would be vetted through a working group. So a proposal was requested from McCormick Taylor, who's the township's traffic engineer, and also the same firm that facilitated and completed the Northland area transportation mobility study. That's been provided with your agenda. It is right on budget, meaning it's basically exactly what was budgeted for this specific project. So staff is recommending the award of that professional services contract this evening. I think what we would do now, given the pandemic and the other issues going on, is we would delay issuing the notice to proceed and authorization for the contract until after there was some resolution to it, because tied to the contract is the duration of it. So, we wouldn't want to start them off and then have to wait a month and be a month behind out of the gate with the overall project. So, if the board gives the approval this evening, which we're still recommending that you do, we would wait to execute it and issue the notice to proceed until we are able to facilitate these public meetings and engagement sessions. So it may delay it a little bit, but we shouldn't be too far, hopefully not too far behind the curve.
You want a motion first, or
Yes.
should I ask my question?
Yeah, let's have a motion and
Okay, sorry.
discussion, yeah.
I move,
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I move the Board of Supervisors award the professional services contract to McCormick Taylor to conduct the Pine Grove Mills mobility study in the amount of $50,010. The end.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So I did want to ask, in the letter that was included, under the vehicle traffic data collection, this is what you're speaking to, that we're not under normal traffic patterns right now. So it says in there they're going to capture 7 days of data spanning a typical week and weekend when Penn State University and the State College Area School District are in regular session. So that so it would not be done over the summer, I wouldn't think, because
Right,
we're
so-
not going to get those kinds of counts then.
I think we would have to do what our best with the conditions that were available to us. So it's not impossible for them to add assumptions and use modeling if the actual conditions out there don't permit true counts to be taken based on those projected based on those conditions. So what I mean to say is, if they're, based on the scope of work and how we're proceeding, and depending on how long, they're delayed due to, force majeure events, they would be able to use some modeling in order to replicate actual conditions out there to supplement their true traffic counts based on reasonable and educated assumptions of how those would be impacted. So if they couldn't get it when Penn State were in session or when State College Area School District were in session, they could supplement those numbers to more accurately reflect those conditions.
So I guess, given, my question has changed since this afternoon, so I guess I'm wondering then about the timeline. I agree, approving this and moving forward, but how long do we have once this is approved to have them begin? Because we still want people working and commuting. I wouldn't want the entire study to be based on assumptions.
Ghost town?
Yeah, and I don't like the thought of putting it off until the fall, but, students come back in August, and so that's not the end of the world. That might be a better scenario for this. So is that possible, if this is approved today, that we hold off on starting it at least for a few weeks to see what's happening, and then possibly hold off until Penn State is back in session in SCASD?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, depending on, what the conditions are out there. Now, there's nothing in here, and I mean, that says specifically that there's, the proposal is good for so many days after the agreement's been awarded, so there's nothing specific to reference, but McCormick Taylor's been really good about working with the township in the past. We've used them for a variety of things, including land development plan reviews, so there's a very good and established working relationship there. I'm sure that if we said, hey, can we restructure the scope so that, the counts are taken again in the fall when there's, when there's activity again, if that be necessary, they'd be willing to accommodate that. If they need to revise their fee or anything because it's taken, longer than originally projected, we'll just kind of keep rolling ahead as planned. But the proposal and the project schedule has data collection taking place in the spring. So I guess it may stretch out the entire scope of work, presumably or possibly into 2021 if that's the case. So we would just have to, address that situation if it presented itself.
So what is the disadvantage if we started this in August? And the reason I say this is because not only is Penn State not in session, but our regular movement patterns are different now. And so what I want to know, what do we lose if we start this in, let's say, August or whenever, tentatively around September or last week of August? What happens? What do we lose by doing that?
Well, I don't think you lose anything. I mean, I don't know whether the proposal would have to be adjusted, and there's nobody here from McCormick Taylor to speak to any of the specifics of what, of the scope of work, and, Dave Modriger's not here to talk about maybe some variables that he might be more familiar with that might change as a result of, pushing back that notice to proceed to the late summer. But of course, most obviously, it would span 2 fiscal years, so there would be a need to budget the remainder in the upcoming fiscal year, which, typically is not advisable because, priorities change. I mean, this board will still be here, so, it'd still be the same group making that decision, but, there's no guarantee that those funds will be available next year until the upcoming fiscal year's budget's been approved. So there is that element of uncertainty when you talk about capital projects like this that span multiple fiscal years. I don't think in this case it's a huge concern, but it's at least something to be mindful of. And I don't know, frankly, enough about this, the science of traffic engineering to speak to any differences in the conditions that they would observe or how the report might be affected, but all I can say is that we really, designed this project to be done in the 2020 calendar year, which is why it has that Gantt chart included that shows the, conclusion and final report to the board mid-November. So we're, already kind of operating in a thin margin if we're trying to get it done this year. But if there's no need to do that, then, and the board wants to defer it until the mid to late summer, I think the other advantage that we had identified in this is that, particularly as we bring this committee on to do the small area plan implementation, that they could be engaged as part of this process, and they still could be if it's pushed back into August, but it just aligned really well with the start of this committee, that part of their first task could be to assist in their review and oversight of the development of this transportation mobility study. So again, there's nothing that I'm super concerned about if the board decided to go that route, but those are just some initial thoughts that come to mind anyway.
And just to follow up, are there parts of this project that could be done before the traffic, really, the traffic measurement part could be done when the traffic really is there, but is there a planning part or other things that can be done, and then that part could be done in August, or is it not that many weeks?
Looking at the project, I think there are some things that could be done maybe out of step. I mean, there are some things that are done independently of the, traffic data collection that they're doing out there. Anything related to pedestrian mobility, I mean, some of that may be to some degree dependent on the vehicular traffic through the corridor, but some of that presumably could also be done independent as well. The one thing to note, though, is this does tie, as I'm thinking through this does tie into the signal warrant analysis that the board's being asked to consider next. So, I mean, in general, given there's a tie into the signal warrant study, I would advise the board that if you are deferring this to the summer, that you also do the same with the signal study, because that's going to connect in with this analysis. In fact, we're recommending the same firms be engaged to do both.
Yeah, I'm actually more concerned about the signal warrant study than about this, because if the mobility study, if we're working on assumptions and we just trust McCormick Taylor to be making good assumptions, that's fine. If we're presenting a warrant study to the state based on assumptions, they may not be as fine with just taking the assumptions. I guess my thought is that it might be better just to rethink the timing on this, because if we know this traffic counts are going to be off, and we don't want to be bringing people together for the meetings, it's...
Well, in terms of meetings, I think that if everything else was lined up, we could probably handle it through formats. We've got a lot of methods that we could use to identify hotspots. We've already done some of that in small area plan. But I think really it's the data to show, and again, jumping ahead to the next agenda item that's tied into this, the data that we need to show to PennDOT. Dave, is there anything that you would recommend? I don't quite know the process. Like, if we don't approve this exact thing, do we have to go back to the drawing board, or can we give you some sort of approval to talk, to see if you can refine this, but it's pre-approved?
And I would say, because in here, that's what's in their scope, is to do those traffic counts during 7 typical days, and they're well aware that we don't have typical days right now. So I think they may as well be interested in revisiting this. And it may work out, we don't know, to do it this spring. It could, we don't know that.
So, my notes from the township engineer from this morning when we discussed this, his recommendation is that the board award the contracts tonight for both these projects, but again, that we wait to sign the authorization until things normalize. He writes, until work patterns in the region normalize, particularly with Penn State and State College Area School District. But we can get things, by approving the agreement, we can wait for those conditions to normalize again, and then we can get started right away. So, I don't think there's any harm. I mean, I understand what the board's priorities are, and those align with staff's, assessment of the situation too. So I think if the board did want to proceed tonight, we would be okay doing that. It'd still be all right. We'll monitor those conditions out there, wait for them to get back to normal based on what we need to assess in order to get the scope of work completed. Maybe I shouldn't have said what I said about modeling, because quite frankly, I don't know enough about whether that's something they would employ for something like this. So I could be speaking out of turn in that, admittedly. But I know we have used modeling in the past, like at Science Park, Sandy Drive. So I know they have that at their disposal, but I don't know whether it would be appropriate for something like this. Given that, I think it's more likely that they would wait for conditions to return to what we expect to see out there. And if that took until the fall, and, in order to get going, because that's when conditions return, well, then so be it. Then we'll be in a, situation where we have a contract that we do have to, commit to funding over 2 fiscal years. But again, I don't have a lot of concerns with that. So, I think I'm back to my first recommendation, or my original recommendation, that we, that the board proceed with awarding these tonight, but we'll wait until conditions are what they need to be out there in order to collect that data.
Yeah. My only question on that is McCormick Taylor going to be willing,
Right.
if we move this out 6 months, to stick with the price?
Yeah.
If they're not, and it's significant, I will certainly come back to the board.
Okay.
If they're talking about, if we're talking about pushing it out 6 months, but we can get, and it's, close enough, we can get it done in that, 2-year, I'll just rebudget for whatever the difference is for 2021, and have that discussion then. If they're saying, well, now it's gonna be $80,000 instead of $50,000, then we'll come back and get a reauthorization.
Or 50,020 instead of
2020.
50,020.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? So we do have a motion and a second.
We do.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now we move to the award of professional services contract to conduct the State Route 45, State Route 26, Nixon Road Signal Warrant Study.
Thank you. I think we covered a lot of the details on this with the previous agenda item, but it does, the 2020 budget includes a task to perform the signal warrant study at the intersections of Pine Grove Road, which is State Route 45, and Water Street coming down the mountain, State Route 26, and then Nixon Road, which is a little bit offset from that intersection at the base of the mountain. There's a proposal in your agenda this evening that staff is recommending the board approve. And in this case, it was under budget. We have $25,000 in the budget for this particular item, and it came in at just over $16,500. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them to the best I can, but this is certainly an engineering subject that I'm not very well versed in. I can get answers for you, though, if I can't respond.
Have a motion.
I move the Board of Supervisors award the professional services contract to McCormick Taylor to conduct the Pine Grove Road, State Route 45, Water Street, State Route 26, and Nixon Road Signal Warrant Study in the amount of $16,575.
Second?
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion on this one? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next.
Oh, can I make one comment?
Certainly.
When the CCMPO comes back into meeting operation, I think they normally have a time where they say, oh, partners, announce what you're doing. Can we mention during that we're doing this warrant study?
We can, and that's an informal comment period where they just go around the table, so,
Great.
yes.
Thank you.
I'll have to make a note, and maybe you can also remind me.
Yes, I certainly will.
Next is review of Chapter 19, Signs Draft Ordinance Amendment.
Thank you. So I'm kind of pinch hitting for Jenna Wargo, the Planning and Zoning Director, on this one. So, bear with me, please. If I don't have any answers to questions that the board has, I will get those back over to Jenna, who took the lead on drafting the amendment that's included with your agenda this evening. The intent is to encourage the effective use of signs as a means of communication with the township. We also want to remain compliant with the United States Supreme Court decision, Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona, that established some requirements for municipal sign ordinances relative to their standing with the First Amendment or freedom of speech. So we are confident that this proposed amendment has done all of those things. There was also a discussion item about a year ago, almost to the day, with the Board of Supervisors, where there were comments heard from board members about things that they were interested in incorporating into this draft amendment. Those have all been incorporated as well. The one item of note, I guess, or the one deviation from what was discussed a year ago by the board was signage in windows of businesses. So these are like kind of window stickers and window signs. Initially, I think the board was interested, the current version of the ordinance prohibits them. The board had some discussion about having an allowance for those kinds of signs, so those window signs. Staff, after looking at it and talking with the police department, who have an interest in being able to see through business windows for public safety reasons, is recommending that we limit the surface area, I guess, of a window that can be signed to no more than 20%. So 20% of the facade of a window of a business could be a sign. Again, that's what we're recommending. It allows for, a little bit better aesthetics, and it also doesn't preclude the police from being able to see in for public safety needs, and it discourages, I guess, potentially discourages criminal activity. So, what I'm asking, or what staff is asking this evening, is that it be referred to the Planning Commission for their review and their comments and a recommendation back to the board. If there's anything that you want to work into it or questions that you have, as I said, what I can't answer, I'll take back to Jenna, and I'll get responses for the board. Otherwise, there'll be another opportunity to review and comment on the draft.
Do you want a motion?
Sure.
Okay, I don't have my glasses on. I move that the Board of Supervisors refer the draft ordinance to the Ferguson Township Planning Commission for review and a recommendation.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Dave, I searched in here. I may just not have found it. I found banner many times in here, but the context that I found it under, it did not seem to be the context that it has been discussed in also. So yes, that, how it's already explicated, but we had previously, long time ago, maybe Steve and I, maybe are the only board members that were there at that time, talked about enabling a banner across a PennDOT roadway in the village area in support of implementing some of the goals of the Pine Grove Mill Small Area Plan. It may be in here and I just couldn't find it. Could you, though, make a special note for the Planning Commission to please see how they can work that into this ordinance if it's not there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have concerns about if I may, about the logic that we need to see into businesses to make sure that they're not committing any crimes. I mean, if someone were to build a business without any glass walls, we would permit that. And so now we are saying that, okay, if you have a glass wall, then you have to only hide this much of it and leave this much free for us to peek in. I don't like that logic. And yeah, I mean, if there are aesthetic reasons and good aesthetic reasons, and there are some, or some things we can do on that line, that's fine. But that's just my personal view on that topic.
I mean, I don't have any real response. I haven't spoken to the chief of police directly on it. I know that it was partly his recommendation, or the recommendation from the police department, that there be some limitation on the ability for somebody to totally, cover up a window facade, and largely for that reason, as a deterrent for criminal activity. If somebody was breaking in, or potentially breaking into a business or something like that, I guess if you might be less inclined to do something like that if you think, somebody who's walking by or driving by is going to be able to look in and see whatever, see you doing that and call attention to it or call the authorities. So I don't think it's intended to be, like a spy tactic per se, but I think it's just to, just give a little bit more, just a little bit of an added deterrent for that kind of activity. But it's certainly at the discretion of the board if you want to allow for that signage to cover the entire facade of a glass door, or, I mean, remember, it's not just a glass window, it would be a door or something like that too, to a business. They're typically, is a glass area there too. I think a lot of the discussion was about people that might want to have, like, just use, since we're talking about Pine Grove Mills a lot tonight, if there was a Pine Grove Mills business district or something like that, and, you know, sometimes you see those little stickers that get affixed to the door, you know, that would be, by the letter of the law of our current ordinance, that would be a prohibited sign. So this would allow for that,
Right.
but place restrictions on somebody's ability to cover up more than 20% of that.
Yeah,
It's just
at the-
about where you want to draw.
Yeah, at the time of the discussion, we were also talking about things like the Visa, MasterCard
We were, yeah.
stickers, things like that, so.
Yeah, I guess maybe just get some clarification on that in terms of like the difference between like a painting wouldn't be considered a sign on a door, so maybe there's something the chief's thinking about that we as non-law enforcement people are not thinking about, so maybe vision from the inside to the outside and protecting the security of the officers, the safety of the officers, but maybe just get some clarification on that as we go through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the security benefits. There's always a security benefit if I can see whatever everyone is doing in their house, and then that way I can always stop, things at the first sign of burglary or whatever else. But it's just balancing individual privacy and privacy of businesses with the security benefits.
Any other discussion or questions?
Thanks for the work on the sign ordinance. I know it's not a lot of
I
fun.
can't take credit, I'll pass it on to the
Tell
people
Jenna.
who can.
Yeah.
Now, did we do a motion on this already?
We did, yes, we have a
Yes,
motion.
okay, thought so, okay. In that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is appointment to the Center Region Building and Housing Board of Appeals.
Thank you, I'll make it brief. There's a recommendation that was forwarded from the COG General Forum at its February meeting that the participating municipalities appoint Mr. Ryan Solnoski to the Property Maintenance Board to a 3-year term commencing February 25th, 2020.
I move that the Board of Supervisors appoint the applicant, Ryan Solnoski, PhD, and professional engineer, to the Center Region Building and Housing Board of Appeals for a 3-year term as recommended by the COG General Forum.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item has been moved to later meeting.
Thank you.
And we have the award of contract 2020-C6 curb and ramp upgrades.
Provided with the agenda is a memo from Ryan Scanlon, the Assistant Township Engineer, summarizing the bids that were received for curb and ramp upgrades. There were 3 bids received, and staff is recommending the award to the low bidder, Glenn O'Hawbaker, in an amount of $64,937. The low bid is within the township's budget and lower than the engineer's estimate.
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020-C6 to Glenn O'Hawbaker in the amount of $64,937 as recommended in the Assistant Township Engineer's memorandum dated March 11th, 2020.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is award of contract 2020-C8 line striping.
This is an annual bid that the township puts out, and other municipalities participate in that contract. This year, 3 other municipalities did so. Ferguson Township shares within the approved budget, and there are summarized results that are included with the memo and the agenda that's provided by the Assistant Township Engineer, Ryan Scanlon, dated March 11th. Staff's recommending the award be made to Alpha Paving Systems in a total amount of $533,196.62.
Okay.
Want a motion?
Okay. I move that the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020-C8 to Alpha Space Control in an amount of...
Oh, I messed the amount up. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'll just be quiet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Yeah, you were
I'm
at the
sorry.
next one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I see.
In the amount of $280,242.79 as recommended in the Assistant Township Engineer's memorandum dated March 4th, 2020.
Second?
And so did you want to give a spiel on that, Dave, or you?
Sorry about that. I can. I mean, I certainly can. It's, basically, in this case, and this is another example where the township manages the contract. There are about a dozen others that participated this year. Again, it's within budget. And the one thing to note about this contract, the right one that I should have been talking about, is that it was significantly over budget this year. Quantity pricing has gone up dramatically. We were hoping that it wouldn't hit us in the 2020 budget based on discussions that we had with the contractor that we've used in the past. Unfortunately, it did. What we intend to do, we're recommending that the award be made, which exceeds our budget, but we're going to be reevaluating the areas that we're line striping this year, and we're going to basically put off the things that can be put off. So there's areas that don't need to be striped this year. We're going to defer those to a future contract year. And then there are areas that don't pose an immediate safety risk to the community that we're also going to defer to future program years. And we're confident that we may not be able to get it under budget, but we can get it much, much closer to what it is, if not right on our budgeted estimate for this year. We do put this out every year to about approximately 20 vendors around the state and country that do this work. There's quite a few of them, but they're scattered. They're pretty far away. And we typically only get one bid because the pricing has been so good. Now, that may change in future years because their pricing has been, maybe is a little bit closer to the market with this year's contract. But at least as of this year, we only have the one bid. And we're going to do what we can to get it back down closer to budget, but we are recommending it be awarded in the full amount.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is this the contract that we were going to, in some way, partner with whatever other entity is somewhat responsible for the crosswalk at the Musser Gap trail crossing?
Yes.
Whatever, I'm almost afraid to ask, whatever came of that? Are we just doing it and paying for it because nobody else is interested in helping, or?
Still to be decided.
Okay.
It's a very inexpensive item. It's about $300 to paint the piano keys on that crosswalk.
Yes.
But if it is, the concern is more long-term and
Understand.
any liability that's assigned in response to that. So it's being reviewed right now by the
Okay.
legal department at PennDOT, at
Okay.
the appropriate division, and I can't think of right off the top of my head what their name is, but
Right.
their legal
It's
team.
like Trail Crossings Division or
The
something.
it probably
I
is
think
the
it is.
Bureau of Trail
Yes.
Crossing and piano key line striping.
Yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure where it stands right now. I know the Public Works Director has been in communication with their office, and the last I got an update was that's where it's
Okay.
sitting. If it does come down that, yes, the municipality, right where I left it last, there was a lot of finger pointing going on.
Yes.
It's the property, the person owns the trail, well, then it's the state, and no, it's the it's the participating host municipality. I don't think there would be any issue with us just doing it, but I want to make sure that if we do proceed with the striping, that it doesn't, open up any additional
Yes.
problems down the road.
Thank you.
If we can add it, though, it'd be easy to add to the contract, and it's very inexpensive.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we already have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Bringing us to the award of contract 2020 C9 microservicing, which we've already heard about.
Right, yeah.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I move the Board of Supervisors award contract 2020-C9 to Alpha Paving Systems Incorporated in an amount of $533,196.62 as recommended in the Assistant Township Engineer's Memorandum dated March 11th, 2020.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we have an added agenda item, which is, you have a copy of a proposed ordinance. Tonight we'd be doing a motion to schedule a public hearing for the next meeting, which is April 6th, on this ordinance. Do you want to discuss it, Dave, or want me to?
Sure, yeah, I certainly, it's up to you, I can review it.
Yeah.
Really, what it does is, the chairman and myself and the township solicitor had some discussions about the provisions of the home rule charter that authorize the township manager to exercise certain additional authority with respect to the promulgation of regulations, the issuance of contracts, and the authorization of payments that may typically be done at the board level in times of emergency situations like the disaster that was declared in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was the opinion of the township solicitor, and I concur, that the board, if interested in activating, I guess, or calling on those, or giving me those emergency authorities, giving me that emergency authority, that it be done by ordinance so that it's formally decreed, and it would last for the duration of the disaster declaration that was made by the Center Region. So if there's interest in moving forward, the request tonight would be for the board to authorize the advertisement of the ordinance for public hearing. That would be done at either a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors or at the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors on April 6th, where the ordinance would be presented for adoption.
And this would allow us to do, like, these contracts that we just approved. If we're in a situation where we couldn't have a meeting for a month or month and a half, some of those need to be handled fairly quickly. This would allow, Dave, it's already in our budget, it's already, ready to go, and it just essentially mean that we wouldn't have to meet and formally vote on it. Dave could go ahead and issue the contract. And a few other things where there would be timely decisions that we may not want to wait, or we may not have a meeting where we can officially authorize them. And I think that would give, just help with our continuity of operations to have this as an option.
Sounds good to me.
Correct, especially if there's any contracts that need to be let or expenditures that need to be approved that are above an amount that would be within my normal authority, so over $10,000 would typically be where that has to go, the payment authorizations have to go back in front of, or have to go in front of the board for approval. If there was something in response to this pandemic that exceeded those thresholds, I would be permitted to move forward with those if they were timely and had to be done before the board had a chance to meet.
So, excuse me, sorry. So I think if the concern is about the things that we are approving, then we could make this designation if a meeting is canceled or something, then it works. But if the concern is that you might need to act fast, even within, we can't even wait for 2 weeks for the next meeting, and that's why we need to move swiftly, then perhaps this needs to be done as is. So I wanted some thoughts on that.
This really covers both. It's intended to cover the case where it's just routine business that would normally require our approval, but, may not be meeting. And it also covers things that would come up quickly and need a decision quickly. So that really is both included here. So, and I mean, normally, Dave would not be approving a contract unless we weren't able to, if we were not having a meeting and there was a time by which it needed to be done so we could get the work started. So I think, essentially this just allows that. It doesn't necessarily say that all contracts from here on out will be approved without going in front of the board, but it just gives a mechanism in case that's not something that's going to be able to do, so.
Is the motion you're looking for to establish a date for a public hearing?
To schedule a public hearing on
Okay.
this ordinance for April 6th.
Oh, for April 6th?
There's, nothing's gonna come up so fast. I don't,
Yeah.
I can't imagine anything coming up so fast that we can't wait till the next meeting to,
So to
pass it.
schedule the public hearing for April 6th?
right.
I move we schedule a public hearing for April 6th in regard to an ordinance that would authorize the township manager to exercise certain specified powers for purposes of maintaining, protecting, and promoting the health and safety of community in terms of the coronavirus pandemic.
One second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
So with respect to the three arrowed points, the items under section 2, the second and the third one have the caveat that the purpose, with the stated purpose of this ordinance. But the first one does not have that, so it's much broader. Just wanted to find out what the thinking behind that was.
The thinking behind that was, in terms of the health and safety, is to avoid the necessity of bringing us all together for the purpose of approving a contract.
Mhm.
You know, if we feel that it's not in the best interest of all of us to be meeting, there's still a way to take care of normal business. And it may work out that we don't miss any meetings because we can do it online, but we have not tested that yet. So we'll see how that works. Anything else? Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item that was added was a discussion of some special funding for the Meals on Wheels program. Lisa had requested we put that on, so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. I'm sure you're all aware, Meals on Wheels brings meals to elderly and disabled residents in the center region. And I think we can expect right now, due to this situation, they'll have some increased requests and some extra stressors on deliveries and procuring the things that they need. They're going to try to be switching to a weekly delivery service at some point, and so they could right now use some funds to purchase shelf-stable foods in lieu of some of the cold, fresh things that they provide. Normally, they'll bring somebody 2 meals a day, a hot one and a lunch, so that they can have those 2 meals. And so this would accomplish that, but reduce the number of visits. So I've been in email communication with their executive director, and she suggested that funding would be helpful at this point. I think they can get some things from Penn State, working with the Center Region Emergency Management team to get some freezers and some other things. They need sanitizers, things like that. But I think if we could make a donation to them as an effort on our behalf to help them and just to immediately relieve some of that tightness they might be feeling, even if they are moving forward with their request to the center region. I think it would be helpful on our part to offer them a donation in context of our normal donation funding allotment. So we just had done a round of those, I think, in January, so I'm kind of thinking of those similar amounts. So assuming that they're going to get additional funding from Center Region Emergency Management or what have you, individuals. So that's why I wanted to bring it up and see if the rest of the board was in favor of moving forward with that, then we could discuss an amount.
I am supportive of that idea. I think that they reach a very vulnerable population, and it benefits not only that population, but really the health of the community, and reducing impact on our hospital to do as much as we can to provide the support that they need. So I would be in favor. I don't have an amount in mind either, but I would be in favor of doing something.
I think just to go on what you said as well, I think this will be some of the limited contacts some of these folks have over the next couple of weeks. So, just assisting them and continuing to provide that contact to those people. And it might even be the only way some of them are
Yes.
getting really good, accurate information too. We're not sure yet. So, yeah, thank you.
Sure. What do you think, Patty?
No, I'm completely supportive of it, absolutely.
I'm supportive of it too.
Yeah, I'd say if we are doing a contribution, that we make it in the context of the emergency,
Absolutely.
rather than our normal donation policy, so that if we can, I don't know if we do something this way, if we'd be able to tie it into the emergency funding from state or federal, but we could at least ask about it if we do this within a context of an emergency appropriation based on the current health crisis. At least give us a leeway to request that through the.
Smart. yeah.
I agree, and I think I was just thinking of that in terms of the amounts
Oh,
that
okay.
were, that I was thinking
Okay.
of. So yes, I am in agreement with that.
Do you have an amount in mind, Lisa?
I mean, I do. I don't know if somebody, if Steve as chair wants to throw
Yeah, I'll-
something out there first. I would say $3,000 would probably help them at this point. 2,500, I think we had given to a couple
Mhm.
for, at least one I'm recalling, we did 2,500.
Yep. I could be supportive of that, yep. I
I'm
think-
seeing nods of head here, so.
I'm fine with it. Yep.
So if you want to make a motion,
I'll move that the Board of Supervisors authorize a donation of $3,000 to State College Meals on Wheels as an emergency funding donation.
Second?
okay, have a motion and a second, any discussion?
Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you for
Do we
being
need
supportive.
to put in amendment that as a emergency measure?
No, she
related to-
worded that in
Yeah.
Yeah.
motion, so I think that'll give us the opportunity to at least request that it be
Okay.
considered.
Yeah, we're tracking all expenditures that are tied to this pandemic right now, whatever we are eligible for reimbursement for through the Federal Emergency Management Association or the State Emergency Management Association, we'll try to chase down, because we declared a regional emergency, that gives us access to those funds.
Right.
So whether this is a qualifying reimbursement or not, I can't say for sure, but we'll see if we can.
And it certainly meets our township mission, I think, if it doesn't.
Definitely,
so.
yes. Thank you.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
I think that covers the agenda items except for reports. We have COG committee reports, ad hoc facilities committee.
Let's see, the usual discussion about the Millbrook Marsh boardwalk. I guess they had their first meeting of the work group, and it went well. They had hoped to do the small repairs, which would open up a full loop before school field trip season. But I don't know how important that is anymore.
Right.
Let's see, what else did they talk about? We had a homework assignment based on the goals of the committee. We'll each be coming up with a perception of the work or tasks of our committee. And again, if there was a leftover sum of money, and they were talking about, besides doing the renovation on the COG building, what other buildings would we look at? And they were
Right.
talking about moving on to like the Park Forest Pool as the next priority issue for them. And that was about it for the ad hoc facility meeting. And Human Resources Committee, we approved the job description for the facilities coordinator. Let's see, and then just other details like the finance assistant was moved to a non-exempt status, and looking at salaries, and that was about They just made a couple of changes to job titles of the staff, some of the staff or department heads to make it more consistent.
Thank you.
Yeah, the Finance Committee, the main topic of interest was, Chris Gibbons was there to discuss refinancing the Parks loan, or renegotiating, actually.
Right.
The Parks loan. He felt that it was very likely that we could save money by renegotiating a lower rate. I think after the last 3 days changes in the interest rates, it's absolutely certain that we could save some money by renegotiating that loan. I suspect that he will also recommend we look into renegotiating the pools loan now, because I think that was marginal because the interest rate was lower, but I suspect with the 1 point drop in the rate, Fed rate, that we'll probably be able to save some money by renegotiating the pools loan as well. So that could probably be coming up really soon. Other than that, it was pretty much routine business. Then we have Public Services Environmental.
Great, thank you. I attended for Prosenjit, and we had 3 main topics of conversation. The first was the greenhouse gas emissions resolution. A couple items came up when we were discussing that resolution, and we modified it slightly, and then it was sent back out to the committee. One conversation that we had, we also talked about the inventory a bit. So we briefly touched on, again, the fact that our parkland emissions are not included in the inventory, and therefore we're really kind of losing an opportunity to account for the reductions and the offsets that we could gain through including parkland. So for example, reductions would be things like reducing mowing, reducing leaf blowing, and then offsets would be things like planting, woody shrubs or trees to do sequestration. The organic waste alternatives were discussed, and this relates to the previous exploration where we determined that if we were to collect organic waste through the municipalities, we actually would be increasing our emissions because of the system requirements to do so. So now we're exploring other options other than that centralized collection type of thing. So that's an ongoing conversation. We're going to hear more about that. Some ideas like different drop-off sites. We talked about yard waste versus food waste. So there's a lot of things to be worked out in terms of that. And then the moment we've all been waiting for, the refuse and recycling start time. So the punchline here is that the motion to change the start time failed. And it was a 2-2 vote. And the conversation was really revolved around, at least for me, the answers to the questions that Ferguson Township had posed and the responses to them. So we had asked them to consider, both the Recycling Authority and the Waste Management Company, to consider 2 different possibilities. One would be that they would only when it was required collect the trash and recycling beginning at 6, and other times still do it at 7. They were not willing to consider that, so they did not consider that at all. The other item was that, actually I don't have it up. This item that we asked, which I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind right now,
They said that they might consider that, but they had not yet considered
So
that.
one of the items that we had, I think, mentioned was that on the west part of the township,
Right.
they would do it
Right,
later and the.
that's right, thank you for reminding me. They might consider that, but their response to that was, and when I'm saying their response, I'm not sure who, because although staff had invited them to our meeting, they chose not to come. But their response to that was, they thought that while they might consider that, their perception was it would impact more people to start earlier in town because there's more concentrated people there. And I replied to not them, because they were not there, but to the rest of the room, that from what I understood, the conveyance was more about how there were long drives and when things would be taken to the end of those drives and animals and that kind of thing. That was maybe the main focus in putting that forward. So I, along with Harris Township, voted no. I thought that they didn't really consider our requests. I also, though, feel like I don't necessarily think this conversation should be over. So after the meeting, I talked with staff. I think that we could maybe have a more of a refined conversation about some of the things that we put forward. And Pam Adams had a few things that she mentioned that we could maybe work on. So I'm not sure what the process is for that. I know with Robert's rules, if you have been the, I don't know, triumphant party in the in the vote, you can bring an issue back to the table. Then others thought that maybe we could just do that anyway in COG. So I think that we should continue that conversation and get some of those answers and continue to work with these entities to find a solution. So
Okay.
it's a bit hairy. Thanks.
All right. Okay, then we have Solar PPA Working Group. She had something from Eric.
I attended in place of Eric Anderson, and really the main topic of discussion was the cost-sharing agreement that the board approved earlier this evening. We'll circulate that document, or Joe Vigilone with COG is going to circulate that document for signatures as soon as time permits or conditions permit. And there was some discussion about the rubric being used to evaluate responses to the RFP for consulting services. And we had a yearbook photo, which I felt completely out of place for, since it was the only meeting that I attended.
There you go. Oh, that's what I
Eric-
forgot to
Eric will
report to
still
the
get
finance
the credit.
committee. We did get our photo.
Oh, you finally did. We did not yet, so.
And there probably won't be another meeting in.
Oh, that's a good point.
Wish everybody's there for a long time.
That's a good point.
Okay, then we go to the manager's report.
Oh, public safety.
Oops, missed public safety.
No problem. So we had a pretty long meeting. Generally, we talked about several topics of interest. I'm not going to go in depth in the coronavirus update because we had our update today. Things are evolving so rapidly. I think between the COG meeting earlier and here, we are all up to date with the entire discussion. So I'm going to focus on the other items. So we got the 2019 year-end fire activity report, and I'll just point out a couple of important high points. In Center County, the number of incidents across the county dropped 13%. That was attributed to mild weather generally and really only having one tough storm. Also, the fact that code has been targeting automatic alarms. So there are a lot of responses by the fire company to automatic alarms that are not actually indicating a fire is present. So they're dysfunctional. They're having problems, or it was explained that sometimes they're running tests, but they don't notify the fire department that they're running tests. So they're responding. So that's been targeted. And then the third item was that there's fewer active fraternities. And so just the number of fewer active fraternities relates to the number of automatic alarms, and then also codes intervention on making sure kitchens are locked up after hours and these kinds of things. So all of these were considered to be contributing factors to that decrease in response needs. And there is a link to this presentation that I'm referring to on the COG site. If anybody wants to look deeply into this data, that's accessible to you. In terms of mutual aid out, that's also decreased. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't read my own notes, so I'm going to ask you to refer to that and ask Steve Bear in terms of that. Apologize. I think one of the big take-homes that we discussed after this that was brought up by Ms. Robb, who is the new appointee to our committee from the State College Borough, was an interesting thing that emerged through a presentation she had attended, or perhaps when Steve Bear did the orientation to the fire program to the new elected officials, that the fire protection program has been hoping to collaborate with State College Area School District in terms of recruiting juniors and seniors to train with the fire company. Many of those folks remain around this area. If not, they can also be firefighters in other places. So that's something that maybe we can work on collaborating with the school district. And I think that sounds like something, as far as from what I know of their board, they would probably be interested in supporting something like that. So that's the fire safety report. We had our briefing. We discussed the possible purchase of a hybrid SUV. So the code administration is already going to be doing some vehicle replacements. And our budget provides for the purchase of 6 vehicles, 4 replacements, 2 additions. And so a new kind of hybrid has come out that they think might be appropriate for COG. So they have proposed among staff to purchase a hybrid vehicle as a test run to see how it does. So the committee was supportive of that, and we also said that for those 2 new vehicles purchases, if the staff felt it wise, that they could go ahead and purchase both of them in the hybrid form. So it was up to them. We had our staff updates. As many of you know, the code software process is put slightly on hold because the next step in that process was to travel to other locations to get demonstrations. So we'll see how that emerges, if we end up doing some sort of remote thing or we're going to put that on hold. We'll see.
The Iran and Italy trips were canceled.
Yeah, they're all over.
Yeah,
one of them was Danbury. I was like, no.
Yeah, it was
no.
Ohio and Connecticut. The out-of-state ones were canceled, and then there was 2 in eastern Pennsylvania. So they were all in places that had exposure. Not that it really matters at this point anyway, but
right.
you know, we got those early enough that we canceled them even
Right.
before it became prevalent in other areas of the country.
Yeah. So, and that's it. That's my report. Thanks.
Thank you. Manager's report.
I really don't have anything to add that either we haven't covered already in some way. Our conference, Public Employer Labor Relations Advisory Service Conference, was canceled. That was supposed to be held this week. Manager, who is Brad Wade with WRA, he commutes from the Harrisburg area, or just outside of Harrisburg in the Camp Hill area. So, you know, he's been doing some remote work, and I think he'll continue to do that to the degree he's able. Obviously he needs to be out here on site. I'm not sure yet how that's going to be impacted. His company canceled non-essential travel, but he's not sure yet whether his classification is essential or non-essential at this point. Still to be determined. As of right now, none of the contractors have indicated that they're going to be operating with, you know, a reduced crew or changes in staffing. So I'm not aware of any changes to that, but as Mr. Ninney pointed out a moment ago, this is evolving by the minute, so that could change. We do have some rain days that are baked into the contract. Of course, if this goes into any length of time that they're not working out there, then we could really be, restructuring that contract or how that proposed scope of work is. So I'll update the board with any developments in that. As of right now, there really isn't anything to advise you on, other than we started moving dirt. That's what we're doing there. There's some thank you letters that are included with the with my report from Leadership Center County and Discovery Space for contributions that the Board of Supervisors authorized for their request.
Any question?
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Is there anything from the Public Works Director's report you wanted to point out, or?
No, nothing.
It's
I think
attached to the
it's pretty
agenda.
straightforward as written.
Okay. Planning and Zoning Director?
Same for Planning and Zoning Director. Zoning Hearing Board was canceled for next Tuesday, actually due to lack of agenda items, so is Planning Commission.
Okay. And Chief of Police report? Attached to the agenda?
As
Okay.
written.
Okay. Any communications to the board? Sure. Calendar items, I would assume coffee and conversation has been canceled, or?
You would
is that
assume
still-
correctly,
Okay.
as of today,
Yeah,
officially.
okay. And I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.